say more things in a minute, but I would like to read out a short address to you, because I genuinely could not do this off the top of my head. I have some sad news to share about the unexpected passing of Councillor Michaela Franz-Meyer, who has been a Scrutiny Deputy Member over the past few years. Councillor Michaela Franz-Meyer, who represented the Moortown and Meanwood ward in Leeds, has had many tributes paid to her from around the city from people of all political persuasions and none. They have been reflecting on the impact she had on us all. In particular, her warmth, integrity, her compassion and her dedication to our community and, most importantly, her family. She was one of the growing group of Muslim women councillors in the city who took on the mantle of leadership. In terms of her heritage, she was the daughter of Arthur Franz, founder of the Leeds West Indian Carnival. Michaela was elected to council in 2022 for the Moortown and Meanwood ward. Her contribution over the years to the Scrutiny Committee is valued, and she will be missed amongst colleagues here today. Personally, I'd like to thank Councillor Franz-Meyer for her dedication as a Scrutiny member and a councillor. She was also kind, always cheerful, compassionate, and never went past without saying hello. She will be missed by everyone who knew her and who had the good fortune to work with her. When I was having some health issues recently, she always took the time to come round to my side of the table or the chamber to ask for me and Caroline. That was Michaela to a T. Our thoughts are with her friends and family at this sad time. Can I ask us to stand for 1 minute to enable you to reflect on your experiences in knowing her? Thank you. Yesterday, when we were at the Common Authority, the Mayor gave other people to make a contribution as well. Does anybody like to make a contribution? To say anything or not? No. There's no. You didn't come prepared, and as you can see, I'd prepared, but I just couldn't do that off the top of my head. I mean, those of those who know me knows I'm not usually short at saying something, but it's. So, anyway, let's start with the apologies for absence.
Apologies to be received from Councillor Rowntree, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Rhodes, Councillor Hunt, with Councillor Bowden and Councillor Watson substituting.
Right, welcome to those, especially Councillor Watson, who's contributed a lot from afar. Now you're actually getting the chance to be up here today. Right, any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests? Nope. Right, there's no exclusions of the press or public. Everything is perfectly legitimate by the board. The minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of October, are they a true and accurate record? Yeah.
Chair, Councillor Julie Craig, she's shown as Leeds City Council, she's actually Wakefield.
Got a free transfer?
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Do we need them to be formally voted on? Because that's one of the things that you're a bit hotter on.
That would be my preference, Chair.
Right, can we just vote on the acceptance of the minutes, please? Thank you. Right, we're now on to item 5. If I can ask our guests to introduce themselves, and then I'll talk about the paper. So, do you want to start with Sarah? And we'll just go along the way.
Hi, thank you. Sarah Bowers, Head of Business.
Morning, everybody, and apologies for coming in late on that moment of reflection. Tracy Bravin, Mayor of West Yorkshire.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your words, Barry. I'm Councillor James Lewis. I'm Leader of Leeds City Council and Chair of the Economy Committee here at the Combined Authority.
And I'm Felix Kumiampo, Director for Inclusive Economy, Skills and Culture at the Combined Authority.
Right. We've now got, we've got one item today, which is the local growth plan. Now, the local growth plan isn't just about jobs. There's more to it about that, and particularly when you get into the new devolution framework, the government are putting local growth plans as a statutory standalone thing which is coming across. So it's vital that we get this correct. It's vital that we have cross-party support on it. It's vital we have cross-area support on it. So that's why it's been brought today, because I don't think there is a politician around who doesn't want growth in terms of jobs and for the economy and the money that will make for the economy as well, that we can then reinvest in things that we want locally. So I'll pass over to Felix now to just briefly introduce this paper, and then we'll go for questions after that. Oh, just before you start, just to be clear, I'm told that the Mayor, you're not a grandmother yet, are you?
No, we're still poised
waiting.
to
So if we see the
meet
Mayor,
the stalk.
If you see the Mayor disappearing at a second's notice, it's not that she's upset with any of us. She's got to go.
And Chair, if I might also add, I have a meeting with Wakefield Members of Parliament, so I can't stay for the full session. So Mike will come in and get me just before 12.
That's
so apologies, I'll have to go. But Felix has invited me to say a few words, if I may, Chair, just about how important this is. When I became the Mayor, we understood for our region that we have to grow the economy, and we are not growing as fast as the national average and the South or Manchester. That's why yesterday we signed off £1.2 billion for 26-27 to ensure that we invest in the right things. And one of the most pivotal tools that we can use is to ensure that we have better transport. That's why we are so focused on the Weaver network, bringing buses back into public control so we can ensure those buses go where the public need them in order to get to work, to get those good jobs. Also to ensure people have housing, so densification of our city centres. And finally, that we have the skilled workforce that will attract international investment and enable businesses to grow and invest in research and development through our fantastic 7 universities. It's an absolute challenge. That's why I was pleased that we were the first in the country as a mayoral combined authority to submit our growth plan to the government. We've now had subsequent guidance, and we're reiterating. It's always an iterative document. We're iterating the document to government expectations about outcomes. But I just wanted to reassure the committee that that is the lens through which we look at absolutely everything. Does this grow the economy? Does this support businesses? Does this upskill our workforce? Does this make us attractive for international investment? It is a challenge, and we're absolutely not where we should be. And that £11 billion gap is substantial. And we're doing things differently, we're innovating, and we have new strategies, particularly around clusters. But I will hand over to Felix, who's definitely been in the weeds of the growth plan. But thank you as councillors and politicians, local politicians, also to support us in this plan, that you know in your communities, in order to support people living in poverty or just not thriving or living the life that they could, we have to grow the economy. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. As the Chair said at the beginning, the local growth plan that the Combined Authority approved 2 Christmases ago now picked up or settled on 5 priorities for the region, which we have since been focusing on to deliver growth. Those 5 priorities focus on transport, developing our places to thrive, so looking at housing and delivery of employment, land and related infrastructure, employment and skills, where the evidence was quite clear that the skills profile that the region has is holding us back. And then the final two priorities were on business, supporting all businesses to be successful, and then a particular focus, the fifth, on our key sectors, and we identified these in the local growth plan. The paper you've got focuses on those final two. So this conversation is focusing on what we are doing to support our businesses to grow in the region. I'm sure there will be opportunity for you to then look at, subsequent meetings, employment and skills, or place, or transport. But also, having said that, these things are all related, so I'm sure there will be part of this conversation that might stray into some of those areas, but that's fine. But we focus this paper on business, and that's why Sarah is here, who is our head of business at the Combined Authority. The second point I'll make is that even though we, as I said, the Combined Authority approved this a year or so ago, and we have been working to begin to deliver this, the accelerated delivery will kick off from April this year. And this is on the back of what the mayor just said. Yesterday, the CA approved our budget for the year in anticipation of us receiving integrated settlement from government. And this is the opportunity now for us to turn that investment to supporting our businesses and our places to grow and to deliver that local growth plan. So a lot of what was in the local growth plan, a lot of the accelerated delivery will kick off from April this year. We've spent the last year, and remember I came to one of your meetings last year and said, we're not looking to have an implementation, one document called an implementation plan for the local growth plan. That will be 1,000 pages long. But instead, we're picking the key priorities, the key actions that fall out of what we are putting that plan and delivering our plans on the back of that. And so, since then, we have a lot of work has gone into, as the mayor just said, our clusters and the cluster action plans. 6 of them have been developed and published, and you've got the links to them in your papers. We've worked on access to finance, and the Combined Authority has approved a new approach for us to be able to support businesses to access the finance that they need, the investments that they need to grow. We are working and have been working on our international approach. And there's an international strategy that will come to the CA at its next meeting, again, to make sure we are focused in what we're doing in that area. And yesterday, the Combined Authority approved our plan to support businesses to decarbonize, to transition in terms of their energy needs, to be more competitive and to secure, to have energy security, which is a huge part of the costs that businesses incur. And we have many businesses in the region that are classed as energy-intensive users. The final point is that the whole approach to how we support businesses has also been reviewed over the last year. We've had a particular way of doing things which has been in place for over a decade. And whilst that has done a lot of good things, it became clear that it was not, we were not going as far as we could go to maximize everything that we could bring into play. In particular, too much of our effort was focused on just what we and local authorities were delivering or able to deliver, whereas actually the bulk of business support out there happens outside of that arrangement. So we've developed with partners a new approach which we'll be rolling out through this year, which will enable us support businesses in a way that hopefully will be more holistic and will be more successful in supporting them to meet their needs. I say all of that against the backdrop, which, again, coming back to the local growth plan, were the big numbers that stared us in the face as we developed this. And the mayor has already referred to the £11 billion gap in our output. West Yorkshire has an economy worth 75 billion pounds. That is 11 billion pounds smaller than it could be or should be given the size of population that we have. We have anywhere between 90 and 100,000 businesses, depending on how you count it. That looks like a big number. That is 20,000 smaller than it should be, given the population that we've got. And we've got 1.2 million people in the labor market, but we have people in employment, our employment rate is the equivalent of just about 50,000 people fewer than it should be. So that is the scale of the challenge that we face, and that is why our mandate really has been to transform, to review and to transform our approaches, because successful as they might have been up till this point, we have a fair way to go. And if we keep doing things the way we've been doing it, we will not be able to make the quantum leaps that we want to make. So that is the rationale behind a lot of what we've been doing and why we've been doing it. And the paper you've got gives you an indication of the work we've done up to date and what is in train. And hopefully we'll be able to have a discussion about all of that through in the next couple of hours. Thank you.
Chair, if I may just add as well, this wasn't developed just in isolation from business, that the business board, Mandy Ridyard, the Mayor's business advisor, has been working really closely with us and developed the Wheel of Enterprise, which has been a way that businesses have articulated what they need from this growth plan, and that's on page 10 of your documents. But that access to finance, access to place, investment, and if I just quickly remind myself, finance, place, supply chains and markets, innovation, skills and talent, networks and promotion. That's the advice from business, what they need through this growth plan. So it's just to reassure the committee that it's not done in some ivory tower, actually talking to businesses in the here and now.
To you today. I was invited to attend a briefing by Peter Glover the other day on the workforce strategy, and that was an excellent presentation which sets out the position that we've got in West Yorkshire, the good areas and the good points that we've got working well, and the areas where further work is needing to be done, because that would have given you further background information. But I've asked Khaled and Katie to try and see if we can release that. There's no reason why it wouldn't be released to you, but I've not been able to get a hold of it yet, because that would give you further background information. So, that said, we'll now start with the questions. So, Councillor Haig.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates particularly to the shared priorities with government. So how are the shared priorities with government aligned with constituent council priorities, and how will conflicting priorities be resolved? Has government given us sufficient leeway to adopt our priorities to local circumstances?
This is our growth plan. This is what we need for our region. Does it align with government priorities? I would say yes, because our growth plan informs the industrial strategy. Our clusters are in parallel with government's clusters and expected outcomes. The way that government have lent into funding for transport for our region, as you know, Councillor, 2.1 billion in CRSTS, because they know from our growth plan that what we need to invest in is transport, and also placing Homes England and the what's it called, the Housing Bank in Leeds for us to access match funding for our housing plans, I think is a testament to government really understanding the challenge in West Yorkshire. I have also made the pitch to government that Bradford is a particular opportunity for growth, because we have seen R&D investment in Bradford, underemployment of graduates, lack of connectivity, a real challenge in Bradford, and that's why I'm pleased to see in the national, in the Northern Powerhouse Rail, commitment to a new station in Bradford alongside mass transit that would really show businesses that you can get the talent in Bradford because the connectivity is there. Obviously, government have their own strategies, but I am reassured that our growth plan is informing the industrial strategy, but I know that Felix has been having more detailed conversations with government officers and so on, but just to take that away, Felix, would you agree?
Thank you, Mayor. I completely agree. So we submit the shared priorities that we submitted to government fell really under three broad lines. And as I set out the 5 that are in the local growth plan. 3 of that 5 form those shared priorities. The other 2 are in business, and we have separate conversation with government. That's why that was not picked up. That was picked up in the industrial strategy. So the shared priorities we set out with government were around transport, around our place, housing, employment, land, and around skills. All of these were developed with our local authority partners, aligned with the Leeds vision that was published towards the end of last year, the work underway in Wakefield with their own economic strategy and growth plan there, Bradford publishing theirs in the next few weeks. And Kirklees worked very closely with them because they already had a strategy that they had been developing, similar with Calderdale. We ensure that all of these are fully aligned, even if the timescales were not the same, because some were ahead of others in their development. But when you go through them, you will see the attempts from all the local authorities to make sure they actually fully align with what's in the local growth plan. And the local growth plan is what is the parent document for the shared priorities that we develop with government.
Councillor Hager, supplementary?
Yes, thank you. I think devolution only really works when decision making is as close as possible to the actions being taken, the principle of subsidiarity. And my concern was, especially some things we heard at previous meetings, was that government's priorities were driving this process rather than the bottom-up approach, which would be more aligned to what we want, and that it's not true devolution if we're aligning with, in order to tick boxes for government, rather than using our local authorities to lead some of this development in the right direction. And my concern would be that and I think there was a kind of suggestion that this might have happened, that local plans in constituent authorities were being nudged in the direction of what government wants rather than perhaps local priorities.
If I could just say that collectively, it was a couple of years ago now, but we worked together with the 5 local authorities on our plan for 2040. And I think that early work got us very much in a position where we were aligned on the challenge that faces us and the collective effort that we can all draw together to deliver on our vision for growth. But you're absolutely right, Councillor, in that each local authority is very different. You know, Bradford has a different challenge to Leeds, Wakefield to Calderdale. So those challenges are different, and there will be different solutions for each region, and we will be absolutely mindful of those. But that's why I'm also pushing hard in the Mayor's Council for the right to request around, for example, devolution over careers. Why is it that we're told from the centre what careers advice we will give our young people when we know through our cluster action plans the workforce of the future that we need for our local businesses? But you're absolutely right, at every stage we should be responsive to local need and also local expertise, because you know your regions better than I know, and certainly I know our region better than government knows. So it is about a team effort. But obviously, James is here. He could speak to Leeds and the experience from a local authority point of view. But like in all families, behind closed doors, there was push and pulls about what was important to some over what was important to us. And I think we are really lucky here in West Yorkshire that we have the West Yorkshire Way, where we work for the good of the region, whilst also supporting and respecting the individuality of the local authorities.
Mr. Lewis?
I didn't mean to throw you under the bus there and pass the baton to you, but, you know, you were part of that, yeah.
Thanks. Living in Kippick, it'd be nice to have a bus to be thrown under. Given given the reliability of Arriva. I think the challenge, you know, I think the challenge around this is looking about how recognising what the individual needs of councils, and you know, we've got 3 of the 10 biggest metropolitan district councils in West Yorkshire, so within councils as well, which is always an important factor around what actually, how does some sort of what can seem some quite lofty ambitions, everybody wants growth, everybody wants businesses to do well, everybody wants workers to be more skilled and therefore able to earn more money, and how do you actually translate that into action on the ground? And I think that's where we're able to do that. So in sort of, the Mayor touched on Mandy Ridyard's role in terms of bringing together the business community to work with us. Certainly the Economy Committee, which I chair, has the council's business representatives, colleges, universities round the table to talk about how we make that a reality on the ground. The challenges are different in different places. There was a lot of the work we did with Wakefield Council on the Wakefield Futures report, which launched last year, around recognising, particularly in Wakefield, that the employment rate is high in Wakefield, but the skills rate is low. There'd often be sort of a bit of a perception among lots of people it's because Wakefield doesn't have Wakefield has a magnificent cathedral but no university. But actually the Wakefield Futures did a lot more work on how we, rather than one simple solution that people often identified, actually how do we get to grips with that. None of that is contradictory to what we want to do as a combined authority, or I believe what the government wants to do. It's how it's on the ground. You know, in Leeds we have a particular challenge at the moment. We've got for young people, children and young people, most school years have about 7,500 people in that year group. We've got a couple of years coming through, well, that's nearly 12,000, and that's obviously a lot of, you know, trying to avoid the challenges of people falling into using an anachronism NEAT, to make sure there are the places for people to go through. That's a particular Leeds challenge. I'm sure other places have a challenge around access to learning, appropriate learning, access to jobs, and I don't think there's a contradiction between what the government wants to do and where how we deliver it. It's been really clear around, you know, we know our own areas. You know, the challenge of my part of Leeds I represent as a council in Kippick and Methley is going to be different to other areas of Leeds, and how we can actually make that something that is delivered on the ground. I think the real value of having that strong strategy, though, is we work in particularly to pick out the learning and training bit. You know, we work in quite a I'm trying to avoid going on a unhinged rant here, but we work in quite a fragmented area. You know, schools are, you know, there's lots of different types of school leadership. You know, we've got FE colleges and polytechnics, which grew out of local councils, quite independent now. Sort of some of the traditional universities, a lot of training, particularly at work, you know, happens outside, happens through employers. Not through colleges, universities and skills, and trying to have that overarching strategy that absolutely everybody understands about where we're trying to go is a big part of that as well. And I think that's where that kind of bringing it all together comes in. But I don't feel there's contradictions there. You know, West Yorkshire's a messy place. You know, the boundaries are West Yorkshire's a messy place. We don't have some sort of clear boundaries. We don't have parts of West Yorkshire now that are absolutely dominated by individual sectors, and sort of weaving some of that together is part of what we need to do here. But it is getting what's right on the ground above like some quite high level ambitions that we all know we need to do.
If I may add, just Chair, that we don't have those primes that government are very excited about. So whether that's the Nissans or the big employers with big manufacturing, but I also think that's one of our opportunities. I often reflect it's like playing Scrabble, that if you've only got 2 letters, you can only make a certain number of words. But if you have many letters, as we do with many specialisms in manufacturing, in health tech, in finance, we can make many different words. And the innovation opportunity is there for us to actually be quite a world leader by bringing businesses together and supporting them with research and development. So we are to Councillor Lewis's point, we are messy in that we are many and varied. That it used to be, heavy industry maybe, it used to be mining. We're in a different position now and we have to look to the future.
I think that we don't, the Mayor's right, we don't sometimes have maybe a Nissan for the North East or Jaguar Land Rover in the West Midlands, but actually, I think the third, so after the Red Army and the Indian Railways, the third biggest institution in the world is the NHS. And in terms of both manufacturing, medical devices, data support for the NHS, we have loads of suppliers here. They are not household names because a household name is the NHS, yes. But we have a lot of the supply chain and the support for the NHS in this region as well. And I think, like I say, that is everybody knows the NHS. Nobody knows the names of some of the sort of real brilliant cutting edge suppliers to the NHS that are in this part of the world. And I think that's that just reflects sort of the strength in the strength here. It's not always an easy photo opportunity or something like that, but it's a real part of our economy.
Chair. I'm just interested to know how have the clusters been selected and assigned, and to what extent are they place-based or versus theme-based?
Thank you, Felix, because we did spend a fair bit of time understanding where the Venn diagram of strengths is. And funnily enough, the Venn diagram of our history, heritage and our opportunity, right in the middle is engineering. That the one thing that touches absolutely everything is engineering, and it's something that we should be more proud of as a region, the home of engineering. But Felix, how do we select the clusters?
Thank you, Mayor. And I will do a double act with Sarah on this. She's the resident expert, if that's all right. There are various methodologies that are put in place to enable us understand a couple of things. In which areas do we have a competitive advantage? And then in which areas do we have a comparative advantage when we compare ourselves with other parts of the country or of the world? And we use different econometric methodologies to give us a sense of where in our economy do we have those advantages that I've referred to earlier on. And it's very clear once you start digging into the data that the 6 clusters that we selected are areas where we either have those advantages or have the potential to develop that because we've got the makings of it in one way or another. What I'll hasten to add, though, is that this is not an exact science. So you use methodologies built on models. Models are representations of reality with assumptions and estimates in them. And so nobody claims that this is an exact science. But the evidence is quite clear. We've talked about manufacturing. The Mayor talked about manufacturing earlier, and Councillor Lewis did the same. All the evidence shows West Yorkshire's share of manufacturing employment is higher than anywhere else in the country, and within that there are certain subsectors that we've got significant strengths in. So it's really easy to be able to pick that. We had some external consultants that helped us to use ONS data, to use data from Companies House, to use some web scraping techniques, and actually they are the same consultants that the government then used to help develop the industrial strategy. So we're quite well placed because we had a certain level of insight in terms of the methodologies being used and the alignments there. Sarah, is there any more you want to add to this that I've not picked up?
I think just to add, we then consulted extensively on those clusters and sectors and their relative priority, and we had an expert panel as well as part of the development of the local growth plan, which really helped us to bring in that external check and challenge from outside the region and inside the region and provide that really kind of academic and expert, perspective on, yes, this is how you are going to drive your economy in West Yorkshire. These are the ones you need to focus on and prioritise.
Yes, it's how that works on a linking basis. Obviously, most of these engineering companies won't, in any sense, be geographically linked. A light engineering company in my own area of Keighley would particularly relate to one in Wakefield. Is there a sense that you want to bring these companies in different sectors together in a geographical area, or just have a cluster being used in the sense of a theoretical or a maybe postal one, it almost seems, rather than in any geographical sense linking together, whereas obviously some places would use a sort of campus arrangement for their cluster, and this is quite a difficult, and I think it'd be a quite difficult concept to put across to the public on that basis.
Just before you answer that question, to paraphrase the Mayor at combined authority meetings, we've only got a time constraint, so can we try and find ways of maybe not so much shortening the questions, but if the answers can be a bit more succinct, we can try and get through to the end of the agenda.
I had that a lot yesterday as well, so maybe that's a trend.
It's usually me, Felix. It's usually me rabbiting on.
I see where you're coming from, Councillor. It's really, really good point. The word cluster in economic theory it's not very old. It gained currency through the 90s and noughties because of Michael Porter, Harvard University, and the book he wrote. And actually, I did an MBA dissertation on clusters. It was really interesting at the time. But it's not really a new thing. It used to be called agglomeration economics. It used to be, it's not a new concept. And around the world, it's interpreted differently. So, yes, you're absolutely spot on that in certain areas, you have business parks or science parks and certain businesses, similar or related businesses in the supply chain, congregate in one area. And that is sort of geographically termed then as a cluster in that sense. But there are clusters, for example, in the States that are the size of West Yorkshire, and so or in India. So they don't conform to a singular methodology or formula. We are not intending in West Yorkshire to move companies physically into one geographic area. We are instead recognizing what exists and working with those businesses to understand what else we could do to add value to enable them grow. It might be that in a particular park, so we've got Lanthwaite and other parks that we are developing or looking to develop, we have conversations about how could we develop this in a way that actually aligns well with the strengths that already exist in that space. But beyond that, we are not actually looking physically to drag businesses into one area and create that sort of. We are looking at what does a 21st century business park look like, and it's not necessarily businesses physically congregating in one space, especially at this time when, with hybrid working and others, people are able to work in a more physically or geographically dispersed manner, but still be quite closely linked to each other in the work they do. So actually the map behind us is quite instructive. It was our attempt to begin to sort of understand where the economic strengths lie and how they relate to each other, and then form a strategy and a set of plans around them to support these to grow in the best way that they actually feel they need to grow, led by the businesses and the people there. So I hope that is helpful, going through my economic history and all of that.
If I may just add, and I was just checking on my phone, Mary Paley Marshall was the queen of the cluster from 1850. She was the first woman ever to attend the economics course at Cambridge and then became a lecturer. She developed the economic theory about clustering. So I have a T-shirt that says Queen of the Cluster, Mary Paley Marshall. Maybe I should have worn it, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The clusters identified in West Yorkshire are similar to those identified by other Mayoral combined authorities. For example, Greater Manchester's are advanced materials and manufacturing, digital, cyber and AI, health innovation and life sciences, creative industries and low carbon. What makes the work that the West Yorkshire Combined Authority is doing to support these sectors unique?
Really good question, Councillor McCarthy. And it's one that we wrestle with quite a lot and have done for many years. And every time you write a strategy like this, one of the first things that people ask you is, you know, if I Tipexed out, or how different will it be to the next one or to the next one? And there is a sense in which it's not an exercise worth embarking on in too much detail, because as a country, we need to accept that we do have similarities. And especially across the north, the nature of our economy is fairly similar. So it shouldn't be in London, the service economy with financial services and all of that, huge and dominates. In the north, we grew up through the Industrial Revolution and since, with heavy engineering and manufacturing, and then off the back of that, other industries have sprung up. So we should not be surprised that we have similarities. And we don't think we should sweat it too much trying to over-engineer some formula that makes us seem so different when we don't, if we are not. However, there are significant differences once you begin to go underneath the headline. So yes, creative industries may be identified across, I'm sure, all combined authority areas, especially the north, but probably beyond that. But once you go beyond that and you ask yourself, what within the creative industries is this place actually good at? Then you begin to see some differences. So it might be music somewhere, in another place it will be fashion and textiles, or it will be games development, software development. We have live immersive technology with some brilliant companies here doing amazing, amazing things. So you begin to tease out those differences. It's the same in manufacturing. Many other areas, Manchester talks about advanced materials because of graphene. Yeah, that is the big thing that they've got, and they built a whole industry around that. We've got specialty textiles here in West Yorkshire. We've got incredible businesses making textiles for defense, for aerospace, for some civil nuclear, etc. So once you begin to go underneath the headline, you tease out some of these differences, and that is where the cluster approach has been crucial. So we are completely revamping our business board to be built on the stilts of these clusters. So we are setting up cluster groups. There are 6 of them already either standing or close to be ready, and then there are others that we are considering. And the leaders of each of those groups then sit on the business board itself, which will meet, 3 or 4 times a year to have sort of a more rounded conversation. But we are driving the growth through these clusters. They are owning the action plans that you've got and working with us and with other partners to interpret that and to help us implement that. That is the approach. And at that level, we are able to identify and work with the nuances that are more specific to our area. I hope that makes sense.
If I may just add as well, that we are also using the clusters where there are similarities to help us under the Great North banner. All the northern mayors have come together to identify where our strengths are similar, where we can make the case internationally and globally that we are a centre of excellence. So whether that's green energy across the north, whether that's the creative industries across the north, making the case of trade and investment and opportunities across the north. And as mayors, we're all going to India in the autumn, collectively to make the case for the north. So whilst it may feel like the similarities, actually we're trying to lean into where the similarities are also going to give us a front-footed position in comparison to London and the South East.
No, Chair, that's okay. Thank you.
Good morning. How do we intend to balance AI growth to ensure that AI does not negatively impact the creative and other regional industries? I'm thinking here particularly about jobs.
Thank you. I think what's really interesting when people talk about AI clusters is that people are quite fixated on data centres, but in our region we have been using AI in many of our sectors already for many years, whether that's health and life sciences, tech, digital, whether that's financial services. That's why we're attracting unicorns like Go Cardless to Leeds, because we have that infrastructure. Here in West Yorkshire, we are bidding to government to be an AI cluster, and that's looking very positive. You'll know Microsoft have confirmed they're coming to Leeds. But when it comes to jobs, this is the challenge, isn't it? Because we are concerned about jobs being taken away. However, what's also important is we want, and this is part of our mission, to increase the number of citizens with level 3 as opposed to level 1 and 2. What we want to do is we want to make sure we have a workforce that is ready for the future to use AI. And most people are using AI in their daily lives already, often without noticing or realizing. So I think the challenge is there, but as we have in Bradford, the highest number of postgraduate AI students in the whole country, one of the youngest and most diverse communities in the country, I'm really positive that this growth plan will understand the need to change in the way that we have to, through deindustrialization, pivot from mining, for example, to green tech, and bring the unions and individuals with us to create those jobs of the future. But it's a fair challenge, and we are definitely mindful of that challenge.
Thank you, Chair. So, contained within the pages of the report, there is a little note about legal tech, and it states that you projected to create over 1,800 jobs by 2025. I'm interested to know whether those jobs are being created. Then the second point is, we talk a little later in the report about growth in GDA of between 4 and 6%, but we don't touch upon whether or not any jobs are being displaced by the legal technology, because I'm hearing that junior roles within legal companies are vanishing quickly. So I wonder if you could elaborate further.
Thank you. I think Sarah wanted to come in on that.
Thank you. So I think the report that comes from is the 2024-25 legal tech report. And that was saying there was 800 jobs at that point, projected 1,800 by 2025. We haven't yet got that report for the 25-26. However, I did try and look on Bohurst this morning to find the kind of the current data, but it's currently out of action. We will get that information to you, ASAP, and be able to kind of confirm that.
But if I may say, PEXA, for example, an Australian tech company, have come to Leeds, and they are taking a tech approach to conveyancing, which will result in solicitors no longer being needed for conveyancing, which would be a real benefit to people buying houses in conveyancing. But there will be opportunities through retraining, etc., for solicitors to also pivot into new areas of specialism. But the world is changing, and we need to be on the front foot rather than being the laggards.
Yes, good morning. Building on the capital culture experience in Bradford, very Bradford question, how will we be supporting the culture and creative industries to build pathways to business development and employment in the most marginalised communities in the county?
Thank you. As you know, the Bradford City of Culture was a huge success. It was probably one of the best cities of culture this country has ever had. And I know I'm biased, but the data proves it. And having had a presentation from Airbnb, the absolute hockey stick uptick of nights in West Yorkshire, not just Bradford, I would suggest because of Bradford City of Culture, is it phenomenal. 3 million unique visitors to the region. We are working with Bradford to continue that legacy. Only yesterday at the Combined Authority we signed off funding for years of seasons, thank you, not years of culture, seasons of culture. And the first one will be nature, followed by the following year by sculpture and outdoor art. So we are absolutely focused on making the most of that. And frankly, the focus we've had has meant that we have the highest number of jobs in the creative industry per capita than anywhere else in the north, which is quite a proud moment given the competition from Liverpool, Manchester and elsewhere. And we will lean into that because employers have said to me time and time again what they need from young people when they're hiring, even from people in mid-career, is the ability to be creative, problem solving, team working, thinking outside the box, a confidence, oracy, articulacy, being able to frame an argument and an idea. And so all the work we're doing on the Young Poet Laureates, the Mayor's Screen Diversity Programme, which focuses particularly on diverse youngsters and youngsters with disability, working class kids, ensuring, whilst they may not be actors or musicians, they will have those skills that businesses need. But it is a priority for us. It's in our cluster action plan. And I'm really pleased that government gave us that 25 million. And we are leading from this Combined Authority, the Great North Creative, so working collectively across the north as well. It is the future. When we were talking about AI, what does the future look like? It looks to me like a more creative approach in every sector. Whatever sector you're in, you've got to be able to creatively problem solve.
Right, the lack of access to creative office and manufacturing workspace and facilities is referenced and more of an issue in some areas than others, i.e. Calderdale and Bradford. How will you ensure that expanded office space is distributed in areas based on need?
Thank you. I'll take the creative one, then I'll pass over to Felix or Sarah. But we are looking at an opportunity to identify low rent spaces for the creative industries, because you have put your finger on it, that when it comes to regeneration, developers often enjoy and want to develop where there are the creatives. They want to regenerate those areas because that's the groovy part of town often. That's where the coffee shops are, the best neighbourhood restaurants, where the young people are, where the vibe is. But increasingly, those opportunities for low rent spaces are diminishing. That's why we're developing a strategy across the whole region, working with national bodies to identify funding streams where we can help. And a good example of that is the Hyde Park Book Club, which we've supported with the guitarist from the Kaiser Chiefs and their art curators there, to enable them to afford to expand the Hyde Park Book Club into more of an artist space. But you've identified a problem that we're in the process of solving. But to the rest regarding startups and scale-ups and space, thank you. Felix or Sarah, thank you.
I'll go in. So I think this is where the cluster groups come in really, really useful, because those cluster groups are made up of private sector businesses, academia, public sector, and the discussions around what is needed, specifically where and how, that is exactly the space that's going to take place. So those cluster groups are really empowered to help to shape what the need is, working across in partnership with the wider ecosystem, to make sure that what we do is absolutely what is needed and will add the most value to this agenda.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that, because I've been working with private enterprise for the last 8 months, and there are issues. So you say we're looking for low rent spaces. There are certainly plenty of those in Bradford. In terms of grade A office space in Bradford alone, at this moment in time, there's a minimum of 180,000 square feet on the market, despite the fact I think the first CA meeting I attended back in 2023. One of the things identified as being lacking in Bradford was grade A office space. So lots of this has been unoccupied and remains unoccupied for 9+ years. I'm thinking of HMRC office here. So there is clearly a disconnect between the strategy, because it actually calls for workspace and low rental workspace. And I'll give you an indication of the cost difference. So in Leeds, it's £50 a square foot. In Bradford, it's 22 at One City Park. The rest of Bradford is 17.50, but having spoken to Loaf, they're telling me that rent within some of these city centre buildings is often at £12.50 to £15. So we've got the space, the problem is we're not filling it. So how do we address that issue?
If I may say, in Bradford, I think around Darley Street and the Darley Street market that's been hugely successful and tens of millions of pounds of investment, there is an appetite to cluster around something that is particularly successful. As you've seen in Leeds with Channel 4, that's, you've developed a clustering of smaller supply chain businesses or creative businesses around Channel 4, and the same is true of the Loading Bay and Darley Street market. You develop with infrastructure builds attractive magnetic propositions where then, for example, the Little Germany has become more attractive as a space for clustering in the creative sector because of that offer of the market and the Loading Bay, because you have to find your tribe. And this is why clustering is so important, that there's no point you sitting in an industrial park on the outer reaches of a big city if you are in a creative businesses where you need to spark ideas together with other creative businesses. So I'm hoping the investment that we make will make the public realm more attractive, will make enable the magnetic attraction of regeneration in the right way so that we can cluster. And I am really pleased that One City Park exists, PwC, that high-end office, because Bradford had too little of that. And so it is a balance to have those high-quality office spaces, but also those emerging spaces for our clusters. But I'll hand over to Felix, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a really good question.
It's a challenge, isn't it?
It's a significant challenge, and it's a significant challenge because the challenge is not just on one side of the equation. We've got a supply side challenge, and we've got a demand side challenge. We've got a supply side challenge in the sense that the activities, you are using Bradford as an example, the nature of stimulating economic activity in the center of Bradford, which has had some challenges for some time, it takes time to do that, time and investment, sustained investment over a period. And as the mayor has set out, some of the interventions that we've been part of, whether it's work that we're doing on Bradford City Village, hopefully, all of that is to enable a stimulation in the center of Bradford such that people are congregating in that space and choosing it as the place they want to be. But there's only so far we can go, and a lot of our job is to then work with investors, which is where the demand side bit comes in. Get market values, as you've just quoted there, are quite low. The problem with low market values is that one of the problems is that investors then are hesitant to come in because they can't see how they can make their money back. And there are different types of investors in this space. There are some who want to come in, invest, and flip the investment in 5 years and walk away with a profit. Or you're not going to be able to do that with the values we've got in Bradford currently. You need more patient investment. That is not the easiest to get, but we're working very hard with a number of investors who are that way minded to be able to work with us, whether it's in this Bradford City Village or other places, to come in. But the only way this happens is for one to happen, and then someone says, something is happening here, and the next one wants to be in there. Because the challenge you've got is that for as long as you've got low market values, you then have a viability gap. Because private sectors want a certain amount of profit before they can put their money in. That gap needs filling by somebody, and everybody looks at the public sector to fill that gap. There's only so much we can do. And so we are increasingly also looking at how our funding can revolve so we can do more of it. That makes it even more tricky. But if our funding doesn't revolve, then we can only do one or two and we need to get out of town. So we acknowledge the point you are making and the sort of underlying premise. We are working through various means, in various funds. The budget that went through yesterday gives us the ability to invest more capital. So we are working on this, but this is not a fast fix. It's taking us 100 years to get here. It'll take a bit of time to get out.
Right, so having spoken to property developers and everybody, Felix, and this is a key takeaway for you. Leeds is classed as a primary city. Bradford is struggling to achieve a tertiary classification. And that's straight from the horse's mouth in the last week.
Isn't that evidence of why we need that new station, we need tram, all of that investment in Bradford City, in the centre of Bradford, winning all those awards, what a great place to work, and a lovely place to take your family. We have got to connect it to the rest of the north.
I think, you know, I'm old enough to remember when some of the prime offices over there was where Yorkshire Rider parked the buses at the end of the day. You know, it's been quite a long journey in Leeds in terms of developing a lot of what's happening. You can probably, pile up a big stack of Evening Post articles where opposition politicians have criticised absolutely everything that's been done to bring that change around. And I think it is, it is not. There's been lots that has been done around the economy in Leeds, around that to get where we are, having a local plan in place that gives investors confidence in the planning system around how developments will be brought forward, and those relationships has been a big part of that. And it's not to say it can't happen anywhere else, but I think it has been a lot of individual programs, a lot of events, a lot of the a lot of things that have changed the city centre in Leeds that at the time were subject to a lot of criticism have actually been they've actually played a big part in that. And I think hopefully, as was in one of the questions earlier around the City of Culture in Bradford, around that and the investment that's brought in will make a difference over time, I hope.
Thank you, Chair. The growth plan, digital and tech cluster section, focuses obviously on the potentially higher value software side jobs, but at the end of the day, we are also dependent on the hardware side. Reading the FT, there's obviously been lots of issues over the last couple of years in terms of supply, chip supply, very dependent on Taiwan, with threats from China. We've had the issues with American pressure on not using China for some of the other supplies. There's no section on the supply chain side that underpins all this, and there's obviously similar issues given international uncertainty in quite a number of these areas. So security of supply, components and the security of the supply chain, I would have thought was an issue that perhaps should be featuring more in here, and how we address that.
I mean, nobody knew that somebody wanted to buy Greenland, did they, when we wrote this growth plan?
It's a good question. I think, particularly in the tech world, the big thing driving it is around semiconductors. Yeah, that is the big piece that all the conversation about rare earth minerals and all of that, is to enable these big tech companies to be able to make these semiconductors, which when semiconductors were first invented, my son was telling me, one was the size of, I don't know, this table, and now this is too small for the eye to see. And we pack these in the billions into a phone or whatever, and it allows it to do all sorts of things, and it's so powerful. That is the main thing. Now, it is incredibly difficult to make them. Very few places and facilities in the world have the capacity or capability to actually make them. The UK's semiconductor strategy is such that we are building on where certain strengths already existed, so a lot of the manufacturing end of it is congregating in Wales. Okay? What we've got in Leeds, if you've got the opportunity to go, you can go to the Bragg Centre at the University of Leeds. What we've got in Leeds is world-leading R&D that is going into that, the making of the tech. And that is what we are. So we are not, because how difficult it is to pivot and achieve enough critical mass for it to be worthwhile, we are focusing more in our, we've got a fantastic digital and tech scene, and Councillor Lewis might want to say a bit more about that with the Leeds Digital Festival and others. We have some fantastic businesses here. But in regards to what you were saying, we are focusing on working with the Bragg and other partners on how we can leverage the R&D, world-class R&D capabilities we've got to spawn a cluster of its own and to use that to support related sectors and to bring more businesses in, because you can see how some of these big companies will want to be near such R&D capabilities, and we do have a lot of that, or at least we have some of that here, and that's what we are focusing on.
If I may also add, Chair, that this work also was incredibly illuminating about where our clusters are that we didn't know we had. So, for example, we, through this work, identified a radio frequency cluster that is pivotal for satellites and GPS and so on, and very modestly just carrying on their businesses in Shipley and elsewhere. And then from that, identifying the supply chain for satellites across the world, the satellites orbiting this world, and the majority of them will have bits from West Yorkshire in them, that if they were taken out, they'd fall to the earth. So it has also been a journey of discovery too, that we've had, businesses just cracking on, and we've identified our own clusters that we didn't know, but that supply chain. We are an area of excellence when it comes to manufacturing. That supply chain, particularly around aerospace, satellites and space, is something that we're also leaning into.
Sorry, microphone. So I'm going to ask you, I've got a couple of areas to ask you about, which is obviously about the fact that, of course, to ensure a livable planet for now and future generations, we need economies that both deliver social justice and obviously make sure that we're doing that within the limits of our environment, stable climate, etc. So my first questions are around kind of the equitable outcomes. So it would be great to hear from you, how will these plans make a real difference to the people who are most in need in our region, obviously those who are living in deprived areas, rather than just concentrating new jobs and investment in those areas where people are already doing well?
If I could just take the human aspect, and then maybe others can come in. But for me, there's no point in this cluster action plan unless it changes people's lives, and those particularly in areas of disadvantage and lacking opportunity. So our cluster on green energy and green tech and green jobs is not just about the workforce, it's about who's also benefiting. So you may see that we launched Home Energy West Yorkshire, and part of that is the clustering of components and ground source heat pumps, bringing those businesses together. But but who is going to benefit from that is the 100,000 social homes that we are going to retrofit for free to the tenant. And we are going to have that circular economy, that we are going to build the opportunity, and then we're going to improve the lives of the people who really do struggle. And it is a long-term ambition. This is not just for the here and now, because speaking to a mum, she was called Chloe, she lived in Leeds in the back-to-backs, and we'd been part of a retrofit program wrapping her home, and she was saying it wasn't just about the low energy, it wasn't about warmer homes, it was the fact that her kids could do their homework in their bedrooms because it was warm rather than fighting in the kitchen. Now, I'm not suggesting that having a warm home means you get better grades at the GCSEs and therefore you get a better life, but I do know, having grown up in a very small council flat, how that does add enormous tensions to family life and gives you better outcomes if you've got that quiet calm where you can focus and concentrate. So this is a long-term plan. It is not just about the businesses, but how those businesses will impact on the outcomes. The same is true with health tech and life sciences. In the National Health Centre in Huddersfield, that health centre is a virtual hospital with virtual wards, and the citizens of Huddersfield, often the poorest, the most vulnerable, will be using that facility that's high-tech, innovation, state-of-the-art to get well and find solutions to their conditions. So this is part of the whole holistic view about how we ensure that people are well and have lives of purpose, where they can be the best version of themselves. But hand over to you, Felix.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add briefly, we do that in 2 or 3 ways. There are many others, but 2 or 3 that I'll bring to mind. One is every intervention we have will have a set of outcomes and outputs that are deliberately designed to answer that question and to support people who otherwise will not be able to access or benefit from what it is we are doing. So Sarah might want to talk about it if there is time, but we've got a project with partners called Innovative Entrepreneurs, for example. It's an entrepreneurship program, accelerator, helps our innovative residents to come on and help them to develop and build their businesses. It's all about help. All the outcomes on there are about supporting people who otherwise would not be able to access this. And there are all sorts of conversations, assessments that enable us to do that. The mayor's driven the Fair Work Charter. That is a key tool that we use, to call it that, to build this coalition of businesses that have the best working practices and create the best environments for people to access and enjoy their work. We have a program called Healthy Working Lives. It's more than a program, a portfolio of programs, which is specifically focused on supporting people who are either unemployed, inactive, most of whom fall into the brackets that, Councillor, you referred to, supporting them into employment and to be successful. So we have specific programs that do that, and then for all the programs we've got, we have outcomes that are lean into this to ensure that we are having the impact we need to have. And then finally, when it comes to deciding where investment lands, you can't often tell businesses where to go. They make their own decisions for what works for that business. But where we have some leverage, our first port of call is always to think about either where the business needs to be located to be of maximum advantage to people that are at the wrong end of the prosperity ladder, so to speak, or how we can connect people to that opportunity depending on where that opportunity is located. So we have a pilot program running right now where we are actually looking to give people Metro cards to be able to get to employment, because that has been identified for some as a particular challenge that is in the way of them getting to work. So we try a variety of means, but as the mayor said, the only reason for our existence is to support people who otherwise will not have that opportunity to also benefit from the prosperity that we generate from everything else that we do.
Great. So just, I know you're there, Felix, you're talking about outcomes, but what specific measures, how will you actually measure whether the inequality has actually been reduced? So what are your metrics of inequality that you're going to be measuring through the lifetime of this growth plan?
This is where this is why I bring in Sarah a lot more. But every 4 or 5 years, the government publishes the indices of deprivation. That is a huge national measure that gives us a macro level picture of how we are performing across, I think, 5 or 6 domains, which gives us, and it goes all the way down almost to street by street level. It has its failings as a methodology, but it's the most authoritative measure of deprivation that we have in the country. And the combined authorities' activities on its own will not shift that, but the extent to which that is shifting is a huge indicator for whether we are having some impact or not. For every program that we put in place, yesterday we published as part of the CA papers, the outcomes framework that we are agreeing with central government, and then the CA's own outcome framework, which is wider than that. Sat underneath that will be a set of measures and KPIs, and every project that we work on will be speaking to a combination of these, and we're happy to share those. Those are the things we measure, whether it's to do with income, employment rates in certain areas, employment across certain ages, education attainment, etc. We look at who's coming on some of these programs that we are part of and track what difference is made before and after. So there are a variety of them. We will share the outcomes framework, as I said, and as we develop the KPIs that sit underneath that, always happy to share that. But those are the measures that we focus on. I don't know whether Sarah wants to say anything more.
I think just to add, state of the region is the kind of that macro level indicators that we are looking at, the dials that we are trying to shift through the local growth plan. On business specifically, just to go back to your previous question a little bit, there are 2 priorities. One is turbocharging growth in our priority sectors, which is what the cluster action plans are trying to do. The other is enabling all businesses to succeed. And that is where we're going to see the interventions come through that are about all businesses. And particularly, we're doing some work on things like access to finance and making sure that underserved communities who really struggle to access finance to grow their business or start their business are able to access that finance. And that is the gap in the market, and that is something we really want to do to fill. That will be where we'll be trying to track that level of underserved community who are accessing finance to grow their business. And those are the kind of measures we'll be putting in place in terms of some of the specific interventions going forwards.
Thank you, Chair. Just to set the context for this question, I'm sure that, well, you guys are very busy, but the government this week has just published its the National Security Assessment, and it is actually very sobering reading. So just one thing it says, high ecosystem degradation is occurring across all global regions. Every critical ecosystem is on a pathway to collapse. This degradation and collapse threatens UK national security and prosperity. So the question I'm going to ask is obviously in the context of that. So obviously, we see the support that there's going forward here for the kind of the tech of the future, the cleaner tech, the kind of low carbon stuff. So, but how does the growth plan's net zero, sustainability and transport goals ensure that any economic growth in the region is actually reducing carbon and reducing the need for the world's resources and is in fact also restoring biodiversity, rather than locking us into high carbon infrastructure or an economy that is dependent on the increasing use of limited natural resources? Not one single country has decoupled their economic growth from depletion of resources. It's been slightly different with carbon, particularly if you don't include offshore emissions. But how are we going to ensure that? Because basically we're being told that we're at this point of a real crisis with our natural resources and our ecosystems. So I know it's only come out, but this is not news to us. We knew where it was going.
Thank you for that. And certainly it was very sobering when we brought the chair of Yorkshire Water in front of all the Yorkshire mayors to share our concerns and disappointment with the way that they've been operating their business. And one of the most sobering things I've ever heard was the chair of the board saying, well, we also should be grateful we've got clean water coming out the tap. I was really startled by that approach. But there is a shortage of water that we are looking to the future, and Yorkshire Water is saying we are looking at how we protect ourselves from water shortages, which is why it's really important to take a 360 approach on all of this. We have our Climate and Environment Action Plan, as you would imagine, but our Nature Recovery Plan also tackles a fair bit of these challenges about how do we protect our environment. You've seen that David Skaith and myself are committed to the White Rose Forest in planting millions of trees to ensure we have cooler streets when obviously the climate change impacts our urban environments more than it is doing currently, but also how we ensure that we tackle locally our emissions, which is why our target is 2038 zero carbon emissions. But the biggest lever we have is to change our transport. So one of the biggest emitters is cars and buses. That's why we need our Weaver network and we've put in an order for £100 million worth of electric buses. We're looking to Huddersfield and Bradford in the first instances having totally electric buses, but also our homes are 30% part of our emissions. So that's why retrofit is vital. And, you know, those naysayers out there that would, anytime I'm in a video with Ed Miliband, the pylon, or Sadiq Khan, the pylon is off the scale. But I keep coming back to the fact that what we're doing has an impact not just on the climate emissions, but on people's lives. So the clean air zone in Bradford that was introduced with not much drama, because the scrappage was good, and it has reduced respiratory appointments at doctor's surgeries by I think it's between 15 and 25%. I could do with clarification on that number. But we are doing this in the round. We are obviously not the solution to the global disaster that is facing us, but we are doing our bit in a very progressive way when actually across the world you see the tide is changing on leaning into tackling the climate emergency. Here in West Yorkshire, it is an absolute priority for us because we see it as a crisis, but it's also about people's lives in the here and now, as opposed to some nirvana in the future for the next 50 years. Unfortunately, Chair, I now have to go, as I indicated when I first arrived.
Thank you very much for your attendance.
But thank you for your contribution and your scrutiny and check and challenge. You are a critical friend, and it's so valuable for our thinking. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Mayor, thank you. And obviously, you know, it's fantastic that we've got those carbon emission reduction targets and we've got a great plan to deliver that. The one thing that I would like to hear a little bit more maybe from Felix or somebody else is this is about how do we uncouple the growth from the use of resources, which is slightly different from our carbon emissions, and how are we going to make sure that we are, you know, tracking and reporting that, and we don't have this sort of like the growth will always trump over the fact that actually what we've got to do, because really demand management is never talked about when we talk about the economy. The fact that actually we need to be consuming less. We can't keep consuming the world's resources. So even if you've got EVs, they're demanding resources. All of our clean tech is demanding resources, massive water, as we've already heard about AI, etc. So I'm interested to hear how are we going to bring that thinking in and make sure that we are not inadvertently actually exacerbating the problem by actually trying to create a better place for people within West Yorkshire.
I'll leave that for my colleagues.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy.
You said something earlier on which I think is at the cracks of it, that it feels like no country's really cracked this successfully, at least at that macro level yet. And that speaks to simply how difficult it is. In the local growth plan, we do have a line in that says, you know, we're focusing on growing the economy. That is our primary objective, but we will hold these things in balance. And we refer to the climate and sustainability as well as health and well-being as we make our investment decisions. We haven't cracked this. And so I couldn't sit here to tell you, we have an answer, this is what we're going to do in West Yorkshire. We have not cracked this, if I'm very honest. As the Mayor said, we are developing, we're quite far into now our nature recovery strategy. It's statutory mandated by government. It will be the first time we've ever done that. That is intended to give us a sense of not just what is the state of play, we have a good sense of it as you've just set out, but what are the key actions that we need to take to begin to redress recover the position a lot more. We have just in the last, just before Christmas, I also made the decision internally to develop a tool which will allow us to test all our investment decisions as they go through to give us a sense of what is the impact that this could make. And if the impact is negative, what are the mitigations that that particular intervention is proposing before it gets through? Now, I am not saying that everything we put through will therefore, once we've got a tool that works, will therefore have a positive impact. Because there will be some that will have this level of impact, some will have that. Overall, we have to work in a way that puts it all in balance, so that if you look at the authorities' activities together, we are having a net positive impact. There will be some interventions that might not be in the positive bracket. But I'm being very honest to you to say we haven't cracked it yet.
Thank you for your honesty, Felix.
Thank you. Fortunately, I have a bus expert with me still. But I was just going to say, on the previous discussion, we need less pylons and more pylons. As the son of a CEGB engineer who built the national grid. So on to the nighttime economy, and it's a connection to quite a lot of people I meet, and it's a source of employment, and it links to how we're going to use the bus network and other networks to create reliable public transport to support the work of the venues and activities in our towns and cities. Because at the moment, the early finishing of the public transport system is fed back to me as a major challenge for people investing, major challenge for employment, and it also limits the number of nights out and meals out and things that we can get in our cities. So that's the question, and it does come from quite a lot of people I know quite well.
Yeah, I think, I think the transport network holds a lot back in this region, and particularly the declining bus mileage that we have. I'm old enough to remember the Night Rider buses. Yes, at the time of a Kaching Street, we are going back, and I haven't got time to go down memory lane. But it was something that has been in place in the past. There are. I don't know every bus timetable in Leeds. I'll confess this to the committee. There are still a small number. There's a 72 bus that runs between Leeds and Bradford 24 hours. There are routes that run through sort of the LS6, LS16 area quite late at night, but it's not the network that, like I say, I remember from 30 odd years ago, and it is something that having control of the bus network will mean we can look at developing further. But I think it's also looking about actually how can you have a transport network that supports. It's not just about running buses just on really busy routes at really busy times of day, but actually how can it support our economy and people getting to jobs and people's mobility as well.
So, thank you. And all I'll add to that is there'll probably be a bit more of this to come as we roll out the delivery of the local growth plan. The government has launched a national consultation on an overnight visitor levy. A lot of the nighttime economy is in that sector. Not all of it. There's shift working in factories, etc. But a lot of it is in the hospitality-related part of the economy. We'll see where we get to on the overnight visitor levy, but that might give us a source of income that allows us to put on meet more of the transport needs for the nighttime economy and other related needs that sector might require. So there might be an opportunity there to look at. I think the consultation is out. We are definitely putting a response in as a combined authority, and we'll see where we get to. So that's the first thing I was going to say. I suppose the related point is, and if the mayor was here, she would probably have said this. We've looked into night school and how effective that was for a certain generation and the merits of bringing something like that back. When the team actually looked into it, it's interesting to know that actually there's a lot of night school, just not called that. And the challenge is probably around it being more visible as an option for many workers and other people to be able to access. And so that, again, the team is looking at how we can do a bit more there to make sure we can shine a light on that. Thank you.
It's very interesting you should mention night school. Going back to history, that's something my grandfather set up in Todmorden in 1920-something. But I think the bit about connecting all of our cities are agglomerations of townships, places of their own identity, and the wider benefits to the identities of all our cities, and I've worked in all of them in West Yorkshire, is that sense of being part of one wider place. If your buses tail off in the middle of the evening, before it's even dark in the summer, people feel left out. And politics and economy is about feelings as well. So I look forward to this work continuing because it's very important for Wibsey and other places.
Thank you, Chair. So we talked a lot, I think, about kind of the overarching strategy and the goals of this, but I sort of want to talk about kind of like the actual support they're providing for businesses. So if a startup company, one of these clusters, knocked on the door of the combined authority, what's the sort of front of house process for identifying what support they need and then delivering that support? Thank you.
Thank you. So we've currently got what's called a growth hub. We've had that for the last 10 years. And that means that the Combined Authority acts as a bit of a gateway for business support inquiries, bit of a check and challenge on what's needed, where do those businesses need to go, or individuals who are looking to start a business need to go into that wider ecosystem. Last year at the CA we approved a new model for that growth hub. So we're just in the process of implementing that, ready for the 1st of April. And that is going to play much more into the wider ecosystem of support that's out there, and not just publicly funded support, but there's a lot of support out there that businesses aren't aware of actually, and we need to help them tap into it. So we're very much on that journey of implementing that new model, getting the right processes in place, the right partners in place actually across the wider ecosystem, so that we've got, essentially this is about creating a connected, responsive ecosystem where there is no wrong door across West Yorkshire, where we hide the wiring behind the scenes, and it's an effective system that businesses can find their way through and navigate through. And an important part of that is an underpinning website, tech-enabled platform we're calling it, website, which is it's part of the new CA website, but there's a growth hub part to that, which is standalone and is about accessing and provision of advice and signposting and support. The first step on the journey of then accessing potentially, a bit more advisory support and intensive support that a business might need.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the responses. I was looking at the Growth Hub last night, and it's impressive. There's a huge amount of information on there. I think if I had one piece of advice, it's maybe a little bit overwhelming sometimes. There's so much information on there. It's kind of, if I was starting up a business, I think I'd struggle to know where to start. So yeah, there's maybe a bit of work that needs to be done there, kind of simplifying that and kind of streamlining it so people know where to look.
It's a really, really helpful point. And I think one of the things we're trying to do is create a bit of a journey, so it's responsive to individuals and people's needs. And there is always a phone line, there is a website, there is an email, and there will be resources out there in the ecosystem. We just need to get the right journey points and right referral routes, really nailed on, so that exactly what you say, nobody gets lost or confused and overwhelmed actually by information at the right time. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, I'm just going to talk about anchor institutions on the Wicker board that provide critical scale and momentum. Now, I've looked at the list. I know it's got the Bank of England and the FCA on there, but there appears to be an absence of private sector representation. I'm thinking companies here who employ more than 400 people. So I'm just wondering if any steps are being taken to actually change the complexion of anchor institutions.
So if you don't mind, it would be helpful if you could clarify, what are you actually looking at? Because we don't have a group called Anchor Institutions. Leeds has Anchor Partners.
It's referenced as anchor institutions in the report, Felix. It says what's being done to ensure, anchor institutions, large established organisations providing critical scale and momentum is the extract from the report, are involved and represented within Wicker's plans.
Okay, I hear you now. That is not a group that meets in its own right. It's a reference to a range of organizations that we work with. However, I'll answer what I think is the subtext behind the question. We've got, combined authority has several groups, but there are two relevant ones that I'll pull out. So on the business board is primarily SMEs. That's a board that the Mayor's Business Advisor chairs, Mandy Ridiat, and it's almost exclusively small and medium-sized businesses. We have a related but separate group called the Mayor's Council, or sometimes referred to as the Mayor's Business Council. That has about 20 to 25 of the biggest private sector employers in West Yorkshire. So I'm talking about Jet2, Haribo, Morrison's, Asda. Companies of that size are all on the Mayor's Business Council. We put this in place about 2 years ago, and it's been going fairly well since then. But we are looking at that since, now that we are revamping the business board, we are looking at that again to see what role it should be performing, etc. And then towards the end of last year, we had, for the first time, a gathering of all the private companies that we engage with in our day-to-day dealings. It was a sort of end-of-year thing we did at the Tile Hall in December last year. And that brought all these private companies together, big and small, as an opportunity for networking, for engaging, and sharing ideas back and forth. And that's something that we will continue. So we do engage with large businesses, and we have forums for that. I think what you're referring to is not necessarily a formal group. I think that extract was given a sense of the range of businesses we've got here. A key asset we've got in the region, is that we do have, particularly in financial and business services, a number of anchor institutions that are based here, largely in Leeds, but not exclusively so. Really big institutions or prominent institutions. And we're working through how we can make the most of that. So that is where the Bank of England, the National Wealth Fund, the Housing Bank that is being set up, the Financial Conduct Authority and the PRA just down the road. We have a lot of these government departments represented just here, and we're just working through the best way of taking full advantage of that. Leeds has a much older, successful track record that Councillor Lewis might want to talk about, and a way of engaging those large businesses. So there is something for us to learn there as a combined authority.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check the reference in the report, please, before Could you let me know which page or paragraph it is in the report so I know what I'm talking about, please? Thanks, Councillor Felsted. Yeah, of course. I mean, what I will say. The question that Felix kind of asked me, which I know isn't here, is so the anchor institutions in Leeds. We've used the language of anchor institutions for a couple of things. The original, the longest standing was the sort of largest employer, so the council, teaching hospitals trust, the civil service. Trying to think a few of the sort of privatised utilities, because for a number of objectives, particularly around local procurement, local recruitment, we felt working with a small number of large employers at scale would help us on that. We've also got business anchors, which are significant employers in Leeds, and we have community anchors as well, which is a lot of our voluntary sector.
Yeah, it appears 15 times in the report, so it's page 22, right at the bottom. It's one of the bullet points. Can't read that.
Sorry,
this is thanks to Anna, by the way. So it's anchor institutions, strong organisations with a gravitational pull. Now, I accept the fact that the Bank of England, the FCA, and blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to think a bit bigger than that, because whilst they might talk to business, from my experience of going out talking to business, I started off with one business and they introduced me to everybody else. And that's why I'm saying anchor institutions must have an element of private sector representation.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, we do, just within... So Felix talked through sort of the structures in the combined authority and how employers of different size and scale are included in the work we do here at the Combined Authority, and the Mayor mentioned Mandy Ridyard, her business advisor, as well as a big part of the engagement. I think the reference on page 22 is, like I say, it is some of the sort of the large institutions and employers that have a level of permanence and a level of scale, which means that they're often big purchasers of supplies from smaller businesses in the area. They're big employers. They're ones who I mean, I won't repeat what I said earlier, but about the significance of sort of the NHS in West Yorkshire as a presence. A lot of the NHS in administrative and back office side in Leeds drives a lot of the economy. So I think that's a question there. But I think, to be clear, which I think you're asking, is it's not just... There isn't sort of 5 or 6 people we talk to and assume that they talk to absolutely everybody else in West Yorkshire. That's not our intention. But like I say, just within Leeds, we use anchors in different ways. That's why I was trying to clarify what your question was.
Right. What plans exist at Whisker to influence change in private finance and IPO levels? And I'm thinking here in terms of, if you look at the decline in IPOs, which is changing, an IPO is when the company's floated on the stock market, so there's loads of money, so we don't do it. So back in 1997 was the peak of activity, and I think currently we're down to something like £600 million annually, and there are very, very few. I know it's mentioned in the report, but I think it's crucial to getting some of our businesses that are expanding over the line to become major employers, which will actually gravitate to the previous question.
If I'll start, Sarah might want to come in. I suppose the underlying point I would want to address is how we support our businesses to access the capital they need to grow. Because floating on the stock market is not for every business. It's a good and strong indicator for how some businesses are growing, and because of the checks and challenges that being on the stock market brings, there is a degree of profile, reassurance, etc. So I'm not knocking that at all, but I think the fundamental challenge we've got is supporting our businesses to actually attract the capital they need to scale. And in West Yorkshire, Leeds has come up tops in a few surveys over the year for being the high growth center of the country, the best place for businesses to scale up capital, etc. But as a region, we do not do well. We do not do well. The amount of funding, the capital that our businesses raise year on year is less than half in per capita terms compared to other places like London. Even Greater Manchester has gone beyond us, which is really not on. So the new approach that we're putting in place, which the CA kindly signed off on last year, and Sarah designed this, so I'll let her talk about it in a second, but it allows us to have a more holistic approach. It matures the CA's approach when it comes to finance and capital from we have a little bit of money, we set up a grant pot here, we distributed some companies, and we think we've done a great job, to actually help us answer how do we fix a system-level challenge, which is in the way we feel of our businesses growing when it comes to access to capital. Access to finance and capital being one of the 6 wedges in the wheel of enterprise that the Mayor talked about earlier on. And so we're looking at 4 or 5 things that we want to do. And I'll hand over to Sarah, if you don't mind, Chair, to give us the quick 5 minutes.
I'll be brief, yeah. So this was approved at the CA last year, and it's really about creating a system-level, holistic-level approach to the access to finance challenges that we know businesses face, because it's the number one thing that comes up time and time again in business surveys, access to finance. But it's not just as simple as the supply of finance. It is more so, actually, an understanding of finance options, being able to then access that finance, being pitch ready, getting your business in the right position to be able to kind of access that finance. So this is a bit of a 3-pronged approach, which is about information failure and financial literacy across the business space. It's about making sure that then the support is in place to ensure that you are then ready as a business to access the finance that is out there. Where there are gaps though in finance and supply, how do we work with the system to increase that supply into the region and the visibility of that finance? And then lastly, and this is possibly the most important bit, how do we work with the system to make sure they are supporting the ambitions of West Yorkshire to increase finance in the region? How do we encourage and support the banks to not have a closed door, but have if a business goes to them and asks for finance and it's not right, that's not the right solution, rather than shutting the door on them, actually, no, you need to go talk to this person, or this is the place you need to go. And that it goes back to the earlier question and point about that connected, responsive ecosystem where there is no wrong door and no business or individual gets lost in the system. And actually, we've got that connected, responsive approach, and that will help address that kind of access to finance issue that consistently gets raised across our business base.
Not a question, more of a statement. I'm just thinking that the cluster action plan should be the vehicle for that, or that should be part of that cluster. So I'm just wondering if we're missing a trick.
Prize questions. Has any question come up in someone's mind as the things been going through that they would like to ask? Yes.
This is a bit cheeky, really. It's got nothing to do with the overall report per se. But writing through the report, it's littered with unnecessary metaphors. And I mean, ecosystem obviously is one that's used throughout this, which Councillor Watson and I know what an ecosystem is, and it's abused as a term through this report. And another one which just came up just now is gravitational pull. Now, strong organisations do not have a gravitational pull. The planet Earth has a gravitational pull. And I know you may all have English degrees or whatever, but it is a subject. It gets rather wearing, the style of all these things. If you mean something, say it rather than use a metaphor, which someone has then got to work out what the metaphor means. And cluster is an example. I know it's well described, but cluster, to my mind, is the things you present in chocolate form, and which I might be buying for my wife for Valentine's Day, a nut cluster. something that's brought together in chocolate form. And you're using the cluster now termed so loosely as to make it almost devoid of meaning. And you can explain things without using those terms. You say, we're trying to bring things together on a geographical basis or an intellectual basis, on a business basis. You don't have to say, we're forming a cluster, and then you have to work out what a cluster means. And it's just like with ecosystem, you have to work out what ecosystem means, because I knew what it meant before I started, and then I read your report, and then I have no idea what ecosystem means anymore. And this is slightly the problem with the report. I'm not saying it affects the content, just affects the style and the bulk of it. And I think it can be made clearer, per se, when you're not using it.
Thank you, Chair. Having followed the links to the separate clusters and the monitoring and evaluation sections on each of them, which is where I always naturally go, is how do we know we've succeeded? There is something on there that I didn't see, and it might be hidden. Fair play, it might be hidden in some of the Green Book or governmental Green Book or some of those sections that you then have to go on to. But I just wondered, and it's a complex affair, but I just wondered whether we were looking at the SME growth, the existing SME growth, through that registration. And are we going to use that as a tool as kind of recognising that growth within those small to SME enterprises that are actually growing within within the life of this plan?
Again, wait to the, and I'll let you, the three of you, make final comments. Councillor Bithell?
Thank you. Yeah, mine was just on the back of Councillor Goodwin. In relation to gravitational pull, actually anything with a mass has a gravitational pull. So if it's a large organisation with more people, there's likely to be more mass, and therefore it would have a larger gravitational pull.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is an absolutely excellent document, really positive and good to see. There's enormous ambition in here. Resources at the end of the day are always finite. How well do you feel you are resourced against what you set out to do here? And are you clear on which bits, if you don't have enough resource for it all, are the priorities in terms of what's going to make the most difference?
Right. What to do is I'm going to ask Sarah first, then Felix, then Councillor Lewis, to have your final answer to the questions that are there, the ones that you can answer within your remit or something that you've got contributions to make. So Sarah, first of all.
Well, firstly, note the points on the report and bear that in mind in future. And on the resources to deliver, these are regional plans, regional strategies, regional cluster action plans, and part of the way we want to operate differently is to play in more of the wider, I don't want to say ecosystem, the wider West Yorkshire partners. This is a collective endeavour. The cluster groups are a really important part of delivering on this ambition, pulling in the private sector as well to do that. So I mean, there has to be a conversation about resources and funding, of course, but this is not just on us, I think, is what I wanted to say.
Thank you. I suppose on the resource bit, we are in the middle of agreeing budgets, and so we will be much clearer. Our overall budget was agreed yesterday. We're now working through how it falls out in some of the different places, so we'll be in a better place to answer that probably next time we. However, inevitably, we will say it's not enough. We want more. It's not, it's never going to be enough. But we believe we will have enough to start. And I suppose when the question you asked about if we don't have enough, how are we going to prioritize this? That is really difficult. My standard response to this often tends to be that, unfortunately, we do not have the luxury of only doing one or two things, because the challenges we face and their solutions are also interdependent and so related, that we need to be careful and pick a collection of solutions, so to speak, and see which ones would optimize. But if push comes to shove, our real, on the business side, our real focus is on how we focus on the sectors that have the greatest potential for growth and enable those to grow in a way that our job is really to be an enabler and not to be a direct participant in that space, but it's difficult. On the VAT registration point, if that was the question, Sarah might know a bit more, but we use different measures to help us understand the extent of growth. The ONS does have a VAT registration number. It has a business births and deaths number that we also track. As you know, not every company, every business hits the VAT threshold, and so we have to be alive to that. It's a bit like measuring unemployment, where you can't use the claimant count, but not everybody who is unemployed claims, so you need to then use the ILO number to try to give you a more rounded view. So we have a number of metrics that we use. There are experts up floor who sort of get into this and give us a good idea, and happy to walk through that a bit more. Take the point about some of our terminology, we will do better. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think, you know, whenever we discuss this, it's always for me, you can end with a bit of a philosophical, hopefully not using too many metaphors, sort of consideration about what actually is the role of public sector intervention in the economy. And I think it comes on to Councillor Merritt's point about actually some of this comes down to actually, you know, there's some options around resources as well. And I think it's been really clear what we hope to achieve, and recognising, first of all, where do we directly intervene, where are we using our convening to bring people together and bring support together, and where we're just trying to spread the word about how things work. And I think that is, for me, is you know, sits behind a lot of it, and it reflects the outcomes that we are hoping to achieve. I mean, I could give a much longer explanation, but we are, I think the important part of this is we do have a plan about what we intend to do. We do, you know, always reflect on the measurements. We do, and we do look at that and make sure we're getting value for public money. But also, you know, fundamentally, a lot of what we're talking about here is going to be around businesses thriving, employing more people, and those people in employment earning more because they are more skilled, and the businesses and the employees are more productive. And that fundamentally is going to be not driven from this building, but it is something that we support. And like I say, I could go on a lot longer, but I think that's fundamentally where this work is, and it's about having that plan in place and then being able to come back and understand what it has delivered.
Thank you very much. So there are no formal recommendations as far as this paper is concerned, but so in that case, can I thank Sarah, Felix, Councillor Lewis and Mayor Braben, who's not here to hear what I'm saying, but thank you for coming along today and answering our questions. You'll probably find that there might be some follow-ups at the next time you come along, but that's the way that Scrutiny tends to do things. So thank you very much on that. In terms of item 6, can we note the next steps and the work plan formally? Yep, good. And so in that case, our next meeting is, hold on, I had it 2 seconds ago. 20th of February, and then we've got the change date in March. So thank you very much for your attendance today, and thank you for your contributions.